How does someone very familiar around airplanes walk into a spinning propeller? Well, let's find out on this episode of Taking Off. Hi everyone, I'm Dan Milliken, and today we're going to be diving into a sad story out of Derby, Kansas. Many people have asked me how a person very familiar around airplanes might make the mistake of walking into a moving propeller. In talking about this, we're going to discuss the tragedy of Amanda Gallagher, a person who loved life and is now gone. I can't imagine what her family and friends are going through or any of the witnesses of this horrible event. The whole purpose of this video is to honor her memory and to present information that can try to prevent this from happening in the future. There's a GoFundMe set up for Amanda's funeral, and I'll put a link in the description below. Before we get into how walking into a prop is possible and what you can do to make sure it doesn't happen, let's lay some background down. On October 26th, Amanda Gallagher of Wichita, Kansas had just flown with a group of skydivers with Air Capital Drop Zone at Cook Airfield when she exited the aircraft and walked backwards into a spinning propeller. The aircraft was a 1977 Cessna 182 Skylane. This is a four-seater with a little bit more room and power than the venerable Cessna 172. The 182 is used as a small plane platform for skydiving, and I took my first jump ever in Las Vegas from a 182. The plane is modified with a passenger door that opens up and latches to the bottom side of the wing. Also, the right co-pilot seat and controls are removed. And that leaves only one seat in the plane, the pilot's. And this allows a small group of jumpers to scramble aboard and sit for the flight up to altitude. And then when the altitude is reached, the door is opened upwards and the jumpers can deplane. Amanda was performing the job of photographer. In my own recent jump training we did this past June, I had the full package. I was tandem up with one person, and then a second person was there to simply take video and stills. In this situation, it's what Amanda was doing. She was an important part of the drop zone team. And on this day, Amanda had just completed one of those flights, and according to the company, as the next group of jumpers were boarding, she moved in front of a wing, a violation of basic safety procedures, and as she moved in front of the wing, she had her camera up and was taking pictures of the jumpers that were boarding the aircraft. In what we can only assume was an attempt to get a better shot, she backed up slightly more into the spinning three-bladed propeller, causing fatal injuries to occur. EMS received the call at 2:40 p.m. Amanda was transported to the local hospital where she was pronounced deceased. Air Capital Drop Zone is a known skydiving school near Wichita, Kansas, and the skydiving community is very small and tight. The school was established in 2001 and had been operating ever since. The school owns two different Cessna 182s. In this particular aircraft, November 8883 X-Ray, was a Cessna 182 Q model. The aircraft runs a Continental 0470 engine, which can run somewhere between 225 to 260 horsepower, depending on the specific model. The aircraft also had what appeared to be the 82-inch Hartzell three-bladed propeller. And jumping into a bit of math here, at idle, which would be around 600 to 800 RPM, the tip of the propeller would be traveling at over 146 miles per hour. That's 214 feet per second. It's very fast. And when powered up, those tips of these small airplane propellers can actually get close to the speed of sound. The propellers on most of these small single-engine pistons will be made from a high-strength aluminum alloy or steel forgings, and some of the new planes might have advanced composite blades made from Kevlar or carbon fiber. Amanda was no stranger to the aircraft nor to the propeller. She was a known figure around the airport and the skydiving school. She often was hired to take photographs of the jumpers. And how could Amanda, someone so used to the airport and the aircraft, have broken the safety rules and ended up dying as a result? My day job is running a video production company, and what we do every day for years and years is work really hard to get that shot. And when you're filming or taking photographs, you are intently focused on framing, on your iris, your focus, on where you can position to get a better composition. You don't think about the other things. We've had this situation throughout the years where a camera person might say step out in front of traffic to get the shot. And when we're in situations like this, another person is assigned to walk with the camera person with their hand on his or her back, being that second set of eyes. It's called safetying the person in our industry. Like, hey Mitch, safety Ron on this shot. Here in North Texas, most of us remember in 2011 when fashion magazine editor Lauren Scruggs, after being on a small plane in December, walked into the propeller at night. It cut into her brain and the left side of her body, and she brought it up her hand to protect her. And Lauren had been up with the pilot friend to view Christmas lights in North Texas, and when she exited the plane, she'd wanted to thank the pilot while the propeller was still turning. She walked right into it, not realizing it. She spent weeks in the hospital and survived, losing an eye and that hand. And since then, I've become a pilot. And I totally understand the temptation to keep the engine running if you're going to take another passenger up and you're just going to swap places, let the person off, let the new person on. If you shut down, you have to go through the whole startup process, the engine run up. It's just a lot quicker and easier to just open the door, let the person out and the new person on. But it's extremely dangerous. It's a reminder to me to take the time and shut it down before letting a passenger off. When I was working towards my solo jump at Skydive Spaceland, I watched the guys doing the filming. Well, I'm a director. It comes naturally. And I could see that they had a very clear and defined line of where they could be as we boarded the plane. And they had another person at the door who I saw was watching for any stragglers that might move towards the moving propellers. I don't know what the safety procedures were for the drop zone in Kansas, and I'm sure that the NTSB will be looking at that. For Skydive Spaceland, we were using a larger twin-engine plane. It's huge. For Air Capital, it was a small single-engine airplane. A factor that could have contributed to the accident in this case is something called habituation. Habituation is when the brain and the auditory nerves become desensitized to a sound over time, a decrease in response to stimulus like a roaring engine. We all have experienced it, whether it's the HVAC system at your home or the sound of the traffic on the road. Our brains eventually neutralize the sounds to the point we don't even hear them unless someone points them out. The spinning of a propeller can be virtually forgotten if exposed to the noise long enough. So one takeaway from me is a reminder when working in potentially hazardous environments to watch out for complacency. When in high-risk activities, to not let myself get complacent. And it's always a good idea to have a second person watching out, a safety. Even with proper safety briefings, it's up to each one of us to exercise the proper care. Case in point was the ground crew worker who was sucked into the engine of an Embraer E175. They had been briefed twice in the 10 minutes before the airliner arrived to the gate, yet they still walked into the engine. The NTSB, in addition to the safety program in place at the drop zone, will undoubtedly be looking at whether the practices were routinely followed, or if there were consequences for breaking safety protocols, or is it a normalization of deviance that had slipped in? We just don't know at this point. Other questions the authorities will be asking, was it unusual for the photographer to be forward of the wing? And if so, did anyone try to stop her? If not unusual, they'll be looking at that. And I could tell during my jump training, watching the dive operation, the photographers were very regimented. They got one particular shot, then they moved and got the next shot, and then they moved and got the third shot. And it was the same for every person who ordered that package. They went to the same places. They had a routine. And if you were to compare the positioning of my photographer with the photographer's movement with somebody else, you'd find them identical. It's a dance. And they knew the dance moves. Was Amanda's move unusual? Was she not dancing like she had danced before, or was she dancing that way all the time? Both the FAA and the NTSB are investigating this incident, and I expect they'll be asking some of these questions to the skydiving school, the pilot, and the jumpers. For the pilot and the people boarding who witnessed this, it must be incredibly hard to get over this, to see it in your mind over and over again. I don't know why the pilot didn't shut down the engine when he saw Amanda cross in front of the wing, or if he even saw her, he could have had his attention on the people boarding. Maybe she crossed in front well away from the propeller, and even if the pilot saw Amanda starting to back into the propeller, it would have taken a second or two just to react. Then you pull the mixture another second or two, and then another 5 to 7 seconds for the propeller to stop. It only took a back step or two for Amanda to hit the propeller. There's just no time to shut down the engine. From the strut at the door, it takes 2 steps to reach the propeller. In the Lauren Scruggs case in Dallas in 2011, the pilot, even if he had started to shut down the blades, it just wasn't going to stop in time. It takes time to stop those blades from turning. Any loss of life is a tragedy, and by no means are we blaming anyone here for this terrible accident. But as members of the aviation community, we need to be sure we are not falling into the trap of complacency, doing the same thing over and over again, and it'll lead to accidents if we're not careful. Or the trap of normalization of deviance. If we're doing the wrong thing and it becomes normal, I hope we listen to somebody who calls that out. Our prayers go out to the family and the friends of Amanda, to the pilot, and the witnesses of this horrific accident. Don't forget her funeral GoFundMe in the description below. And please take away from this a renewed effort to fight complacency when around dangerous equipment like airplanes or whatever's dangerous in your life. Be safe, have other people's backs, safety them like we safety a camera person on our set. And remember, superior judgment trumps superior skills. Take care.